There's a war going on, and I'm out to win it. Of course, I'm talking about the router jig war. If you haven't heard about it, I'm not surprised. It's been tragically underreported on the evening news. Let me get you up to speed. It was all started by the British. Up to their old tricks again. Think we've forgotten about the War of 1812? Well, this time the chief aggressor was a guy with an adorable accent named Martin Godfrey. Martin made horses for a living, I'm pretty sure, and he wanted to put dovetails in their chests. So he built a jig called the WoodRat, which evolved into this multi-joinery machine. Not to be outdone by their mortal woodworking enemies, the Americans developed their own version, and they called it the Router Boss. When it was first demonstrated in 2008 at the Battle of IWF in Atlanta, the WoodRat folks were heard to say, "Oh, bugger." But it didn't stop there. That's right, those warmongers in the north had to stick their frosty noses into everybody's business. They said, hey, let's take our old Leigh FMT jig from the 90s that nobody knows about because we're in Canada, and let's make it better. We'll call it the Leigh Super FMT. Eh? So you've got this war going on between the British, the Americans, and the Canadians, the three greatest woodworking powers in history. But ever since Benedict Arnold fought the Redcoats in Quebec, there has been bad blood among the big three, and it was bound to spill over into an all-out router jig war. And that's what we're fighting this week on the Stumpy Nubs Workshop. Now that we've got the history lesson out of the way, let's talk about the new jig design. You see, I wanted to try out the WoodRat ever since I first saw it. Then I saw the Router Boss, and that looked pretty sweet too. Then I came across the Leigh FMT, and I decided these jigs are out of control awesome. But they're also really expensive. So, of course, I thought, what if I could come up with a homemade version that combines maybe the best ideas of all three jigs? One thing that all three have in common is the basic principle. A plunge router is mounted to the top, and a workpiece attaches to the front. Using a combination of stops and other doodads, the router can cut accurate and repeatable dovetails, mortises, tenons, you name it. The problem for us homemade jig makers is that those doodads on top are patented. Each of the big three jigs have their own innovative designs that we can't legally copy. So the question is, am I smart enough to design my own system of stops and guides? Please. Doctors aren't the only ones with fancy letters after their names. These stops can be adjusted to change the router's movement, be it straight forward and back for mortise and tenon or finger joints, or at an angle for dovetail pins of various sizes. The whole stop assembly can be moved forward and back as well to adjust the fit of your dovetails. After I get it all dialed in, I can add marks to each of the guides so it's fast and easy to set it up for different angles repeatably next time. What the guides guide is this nice long router plate made out of 1/2-inch plywood. The router mounts on the front with a pair of clamps so you can easily remove it for other things. A plunge bar fits around the router, making it easy to operate one-handed. Now on the Leigh jig, the workpiece stays stationary, but the other two jigs add a moving track which combines with the router movement to produce a true 3-axis system. I definitely wanted this feature on my jig. This was a challenge because it has to be smooth and accurate when the track moves. My first idea was to use drawer slides, but as a drawer slide is fully extended, it loses the ability to support heavy loads. Most jigs we build with these kind of slides are designed to extend only about 1/3 of the way, so that's not really an issue. But in this case, we needed a full 24 inches of extension, and the weight of the workpiece will be exerting a lot of lateral pressure against the extended portion of the slide. We'd need like a 4-foot drawer slide to prevent sag, and that just wasn't an option. So I opted for the dovetail bars we used on the box joint jig recently. They don't glide as easily as drawer slides because there is more friction, but if you install them correctly, they're really accurate and they don't lose their support as the track is extended. So I designed this track around them, with support from both the top and the front. I also added a few homemade T-tracks for mounting various accessories that I plan on making later. One thing that I really liked about the box joint jig that we made a while ago is the pattern feature. I wanted to do something similar on this machine, but not so much a printed pattern as an adjustable scale that you can add your own marks to. So I attached an adhesive-backed measuring tape to the top of the carriage and added a movable cursor. You can make marks on the scale with a fine tip dry erase marker when you lay out your joint. Then you can just wipe them off when you're done. I also added a micro adjust feature similar to the box joint jig, which should be great for dialing everything in. So for things like box joints or dovetails, you mount your workpiece on the front of the machine and your router goes on top. You use your scale to slide the carriage into position, and then you pull the router towards the workpiece to make your cut. Then you advance to the next position on your scale and make your next cut, and so on. If you're doing mortise and tenon joinery, you lock your router into place and you slide the workpiece into the bit using the carriage alone. I have to do some fine tuning on it, but I'm already really liking this new machine. It was really a lot of fun to build, and I expect it's going to be very handy around the shop going forward. I'll hit you up with a more complete video on how it works after I get a chance to play with it for a few days and work out any bugs that I find. In the meantime, check out all the other woodworking goodness we have over at StumpyNubs.com. And we've opened up a new t-shirt store with all sorts of witty designs. You'll find a link to that on the website too. It's a great place to just sit back and have yourself a cold one, because you've earned it, my friend.